Hello and welcome to a new episode of Non-League Network Chats. We have four wonderful people ready to be talking to you here. I'm Pat. I'm going to start. I'm the CMO of the Non-League Network, and I've spent a huge amount of time around grassroots and non-league sports, football and other sports as well. I like talking to clubs, players, coaches, the people behind the names. Increasingly, my interest is also the people who used to be famous and people I used to watch on TV. Along me is Dave. You'll notice that we were both wearing the Non-League Network tops, so we're easy to be recognized. Dave is the founder of the Non-League Network. He's experienced the game as a player, as a coach, and an official. And he created a network that I work with him and Jason to connect players, clubs, coaches, scouts, agents, and also to create more opportunities for non-league football. Today with us are Nick and Ellie. I'll start with Ellie. Ellie is a researcher, a trainer, a coaching consultant with experience in well-being, safeguarding, performance, and mental health. She's doing a doctorate at the moment, and her doctoral research explores the role of character strengths and well-being in high-pressure environments. She's trained more than 2,000 police officers and worked across very high-pressured environments. She joins us today to have a look at how we can better support people behind the performance. And finally, Nick Edgar, who is a self-leadership coach. He is a mental and emotional health advocate, someone who understands the game from the inside out. He was a Reading FC trainee, as well as a number of other clubs, was an England under-18 schoolboy, and a semi-pro player as well. Today, he works with men, leaders, organizations all around emotional resilience, self-leadership, and mental well-being. And the four of us are going to be talking about the person behind the player. So for mental health elements, we're going to be looking at injuries, relationships, works, pressures, everything that happens to a non-league network setup. Welcome. 2 minutes of an intro. How are you doing, all of you?
Yeah, all good. Cheers, Pat.
Good, thank you.
Really happy to be here.
It's going to be a lovely chat. I think then none of us is going to be interviewing anyone else. It really is just an opportunity for us to talk about the state of non-league football and mental health and literally what provisions there are. I'd start by a very simple one. I don't want to ask lots of questions, but I've been in a number of different locker rooms in gyms, but mainly in sports clubs. I wonder, when you're looking around, Nick and Ellie, is there anything that might give us an idea of if someone's just having a tough day or struggling a little bit mentally? Is there any advice or anything that we could start there, and we'll just see how the conversation goes afterwards? I'll start with Nick.
I think one of the most challenging parts about who we are as human beings in any environment is that the signs aren't always obvious. So every group of people has its own culture, good, bad, or indifferent. Everyone individually has their own challenges, which are personal to them. And depending on how safe we feel will depend on whether we feel able to open up to those around us, whether it's in that environment itself or maybe with friends, family. So I think for me, I would start by saying the signs are not always obvious. In my work, as well as my lived experience, what I tend to look for are changes to what has always come before in some way, shape or form. That might be the way someone looks. It might be the way they speak, or maybe they speak less. It might be that they are absent. There's no simple answer to it, but I would start there. What's changed? Has something changed?
Thank you, Els. What do you, Ellie? I do apologise, Ellie.
Yeah, actually, I build on what Nick's saying there because I really agree with you. I think you might have that person who's sitting there with their head in their hands and they can't quite cope, but you might also have that person that's going, I'm fine. And what we often have to think about actually is, are you fine when you're saying you're fine? And really looking a little bit beyond what the words that someone is saying. And that takes a little bit of effort sometimes, but actually can be well worth it. And really, Nick, again, where you were saying about how people might not be sort of really able to feel safe in the culture or the environment they're in. It's down to everybody to make sure that we do have a culture that someone can either put their hand up and say, I'm not fine, or won't get really panicky when someone's going, no, but are you really fine? And that impact that can have on people. So again, I'm with you. I just think you don't necessarily know. I think you have to know how everybody is. You need to know your team. You need to know your teammates. You need to know and recognize any changes in behavior to really get a feel for how somebody is in that moment. Yeah.
I think we've all individually experienced our fair share where we've experienced it with other people that we might care for or work with, or ourselves. I know that Dave and Nick, you yourself has mentioned to me kind of your own struggles with it. It's really important to know who you could talk to, and in a sports club. My God, honestly, when I was a player, when I was a teenager, there's absolutely no way I would have gone to my manager and told them I'm struggling. I wouldn't have done it. I didn't want to get dumped and dropped, and I wanted to be in that team on a Saturday. There's no way I was going to be saying I'm having a tough time. I don't know about you, Dave. Did you ever go up to anyone and say, look, I know the culture isn't there for me to chat, but I want to have a chat?
No, I was the one that says I'm fine all the time. I've always bottled things up, and I'm the same with that comment you mentioned there about getting dumped. I think a lot of players, it's hard to go and speak to the manager because you want to play and you want to, will that affect you playing? Who knows? But he might turn around and say football's where you also forget about things. You can, while you're playing, your mind's not on other things, which is a good way. I've dealt with things in the past. But touching on the something about you mentioned, if you feel comfortable, is I always go on about this, is my old house, I live next opposite and a mad West Ham fan. He's like 60-year-old, but we become really good friends. I used to just talk to him, get home from work, and he'd be having a fag out the window, and I'd just talk to him for ages about football. And I've got a group of mates, like 10 of us, that have played football together since we was about 6 or 7. But I would never feel comfortable opening up to them really until I started going to speaking to professionals and stuff. But it was this neighbour that I sort of opened up to first, which I found quite weird at the time, I suppose. But like you say, it's a bit mad who you feel comfortable speaking around.
I think that's why it's so important to understand that when we think about the stigma of really opening up what's going on for us, especially in a sporting environment, and especially within football, when I think of my experiences within the professional game and outside it in non-league, all the way from step 3 down to step 7, the one thing in common is that the performance element of who we want to be on the pitch as players is, well, first of all, I want to be on that pitch and I want to be playing as well as I can. And there is no, one of the phrases that means a lot to me personally and professionally is, I'm interested in the things that you can't measure. You might be going through a divorce, you might be made redundant, you might have just suffered a bereavement. There could be all sorts of reasons, or maybe it's none of those things. You're just in a bad patch, but that might spur you on a Saturday because it's the one thing where you can feel free of all of that, and you might play a blinder. Or you could go completely missing in a football sense. So there's no necessary link between cause and effect. But this is why I think within a sporting environment, having things like a player support environment, someone that you can go to, like you were saying, David, that maybe isn't in your club, certainly isn't your gaffer, or maybe has a vested interest in how well you are, and that just someone you can be honest and just speak your truth and be witnessed, that can change the game on its own. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a professional. It could just be your neighbour over the fence.
I think just on that as well. No, it's gone. it's gone. No,
that's having someone to talk to, but also knowing what to say, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah. I think that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. Like, it's I feel like the same with my mates. It's like you give them an olive branch, but we don't know what to say to each other. I think with especially like my age and people who haven't. We've always been sort of happy and football, take the piss out of each other. So it's if someone says something like that, you're like a bit, whoa, what do I say? Yeah, you know what I mean? It doesn't really happen. I think that's one of the hard things to overcome.
Maybe on that one, Ellie, is there anything that you would suggest? Maybe like both ways, actually, an opener to get someone to start talking, but also if you're the person who's struggling, maybe a way of actually getting that conversation going, like for David, who wouldn't know how to start it.
I think the most important thing is that someone feels seen and heard and probably held, but maybe not in the literal sense, but their actual feelings held. And there was a couple of things that I was sort of picking up on. So in answer to your question there, Pat, the way that I would recommend starting a conversation really is to tell someone what you see. So it's to sort of say to someone, look, I can see that you're not joking as much as usual. And I'm worried about you. How are you? Because that already, before that person has to answer, they're already going to feel seen. Then when you listen to the answer, they're going to feel heard. And then when the conversation continues, they're going to feel held. So that's the way that I'd recommend starting a conversation. But Dave, you were saying something super interesting there about sort of what you do in that moment. If someone actually approaches you and they say, oh, I'm struggling or something like that, it's what you do. And I think we need to normalize that. Like we need to normalize that people might show their vulnerability. Yeah. Because if we do that, then we're not going to freak when they come to us and say, oh no, like, I don't know what to say to this person.
Yeah.
So if we flip it on our head, like flip it on its head, what I'd say is what we want to do is we want to actually not have to worry about what we say to the person that comes to us in that moment if they trust us. If I'm that West Ham fan that lives opposite to you, Dave, and you start talking to me, I don't have to worry about what I say to you. All I need to do is listen and hear you. I don't have to have the right thing to say. As long as I let you feel that your vulnerability that I'm honoured for you to share with me in that moment isn't wasted on me, then the conversation is going to be a good quality one for you. That's where I'm sitting.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I've had a weird one with that. I used to find this outside of off the pitch, like in corporate settings. I used to find that if I said to people things like, I see what you mean, I hear you, I feel that this is happening. If you use those weird sense things, no one ever remembered you saying that, but it had an effect on how they felt. So when someone's like, no, I hear what you're trying to say is this, or I hear what you're saying is that, it actually completely changed it, especially when people were finding it difficult to talk or getting a little bit agitated, because we know what it's like in a changing room. Before the match, everyone's getting all tense and up themselves for what's going to happen in the match. Half time, it's going great, all the emotions up. It's going crap, all the emotions down, or there's anger. And at the end of the match, so you know that there's a high pressure environment there. And I guess what I was bringing that into it because I was thinking, well, that might not be the right moment to engage in that kind of conversation going, are you all right? Are you genuinely all right? Because I would imagine I've met a number of players who are not the same in that environment as they are just outside of it. So you take them off the pitch and you go and have a drink with them. They're completely different if you say, are you okay? But when they're just coming off the pitch, it's like a crazy 11-month-old puppy. Like they're wild-eyed going, I can't even hear you. I'm Roy Keane. I'm almost just gone. So is there a way of actually approaching them when they're in that environment, when all the dopamine, I think it's dopamine, isn't it? When the dopamine is kicking and suddenly you've got all this energy and everything's going on and you just realize that person might need a bit of help. Is that the right time to talk to them? Or how do you say that I want to talk to you about it later on, or shut the up? How do you manage it?
I can tell you from my experiences of managing it as a player and as a coach in the dressing room and being on both ends of those kind of high emotion situations. I think there's something that Ellie was saying and something about the football experience itself, which if you can find the right commonalities, which is being part of being vulnerable is being free to be messy and be free to be real. I found as a player, when I was free to be messy, I was not literally, I was never that good. But what I mean is, when I wasn't afraid to receive the ball, when I wasn't afraid to have a crack at goal, whether I scored or whether I missed, my confidence remained high that I could be who I needed to be on the pitch. And the chances are one would fly in sooner or later. When I tried to manage that and be a version of myself that was high performance, I'm afraid to make a mistake. Or if I did make a mistake, I took on the emotions of that and I would disappear from the game. And I think it's true of mental health conversations that when you can be messy and speak your truth, and if you don't know what to say, to just lead with that, to be able to say, you know what, something's not quite right, and I'd really love to be able to chat to you about it, but I don't quite know how to put it into words. Or if you can be that person that invites the conversation by saying, look, exactly what Ellie was saying, the observation, what am I seeing? I've seen this. I'm a bit concerned. Like, all of that creates psychological safety. And I think the same is true of dressing rooms in those halftime moments. When an environment is high control and fear-based, that's when you get the proverbial hairdryer treatment and players go missing, in my opinion. More go missing than get motivated. That doesn't mean that you can't utilize that as a way of expressing yourself in a high emotional moment, but it's whether the fertile ground exists within that football club and that dressing room to allow people to be who they need to be. That's very different, I think, than somebody is really struggling and I'm making a judgment on how they're being in the game, and I'm going to talk to them in a game situation. Personally, I wouldn't do that ever, because I don't think that's a safe thing to do. That's for me personally. That's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, fair enough. Eddie, have you got anything on that?
You're going to have to
you want to
excuse
say.
it. Yeah. So you have to excuse the trainer with me a second, right? So just admire my little picture, but I want you to imagine that's my window in my wall, right? And imagine that's my window of tolerance. Everything that happens in that, I can cope with. Everything that's above is that hyper arousal that you were talking about, Pat, when you were saying, like, you know, when people are really like got a lot of energy and stuff like that. And everything below is hypo arousal. If you are going to have a useful conversation with somebody, this is pretty much what Nick's saying, you need them to be in their window of tolerance. Otherwise, all you're doing is de-escalating them or being present with them in their low moment. So to have a useful conversation, my window's not very straight, to be in your use, like to be in your most useful place, you need to be talking to that person when they're in their window of tolerance. Now, in the high pressure stakes of match day, most people's windows are that big, right? But if you're talking to them down the pub, I'm trying to get in the picture, when you're talking to them down the pub later, their window's that much bigger. So the hyper arousal and hyper arousal are harder to get into. So it's picking your moment for, put that back, it's picking your moment for when you're going to have a conversation with someone that's going to be most helpful. So yeah, I'm with you on that, Nick. I just sort of felt that's that sort of psychological safety side of things. Am I safe? Not physically, but my brain, is it safe? And you're looking at, is this person in their window of tolerance, or do they just need calming down or bigging up a little bit or something to get them into their window of tolerance so that eventually you might be able to have that conversation in, I don't know, maybe down the pub, maybe after the match, whatever, as they are coming back into their tolerance place. So just sort of adding that in because it just made a bit of sense.
Cool,
and the other thing I was just going to ask you, because in my experience, I'm asking sort of from the three of you, do you notice if you're like, when you're going out on a football pitch, that what is happening, or we're going out on a football pitch, what's happening outside the football pitch can sometimes be transferred onto the football pitch. So it can be people's safe place. It can be their place where they feel untouchable. But it can also be the place where they get a lot of frustration because that place they really enjoy is actually being impacted by the challenges that they're facing, or their low mood or their anxiety and stuff like that, and then it isn't such a safe place, and that can be really strugglesome for people. And I just wondered what your experience was, sort of as players.
Well, I'm gonna share my experience. When I found my dad, when he passed away, the very next day I played football. It was only five-a-side with mates on a pitch, but the day after his passing, I was on a pitch with my mates playing football because I could forget about what was going on at that time for me for that period of time. And I had some guilt of having fun, but I also knew that the pressure of everything that was going on for me, I just needed a release from that for a little bit of time. So I've had that moment when I've been on a pitch and it's been just releasing the pressure for me for a little while. And I've, didn't have to say much. The odd sort of wink and you are, mate. On the other hand, when things have gone wrong, I've also been on a pitch and I've ended up being sent off because I've let go of it and the emotion just wasn't right. So there is both sides to it. But I would say for me, more often than not, it's been the place where I've been able to just go, to hell with everything else that's going on. This is where Pat is. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I've experienced both, where you can go and be free away from your problems, but then you can see, I don't think I've ever really done it, like let out in frustration, maybe a few times. But you do see some players, like, you can just see them boiling over like a kettle, and then something just happens and they do something stupid, and you're like, yeah, that isn't really because of the game, I suppose. Yeah, you get both ends.
I think the biggest thing for me, if you look at it through the lens of like a career, whatever level you're going to play at, I think football has such fine margins. There's not an awful lot of difference in many ways between the professional game and the non-league. Going right down, there really isn't. And I think there are often players operating, some at tiers above where maybe they should be, and some below, and some are bang on. So for me, that's a really important part of it. But where this really matters the most is, I think quite literally thousands of people fall out of football altogether because of what we're talking about here. And because very often the pervading culture is you've just got to get on with, your life is over there and then football's over here, and you've got to be able to produce in some way, shape or form, at least regularly enough to be part of the culture and part of the group here. So the question really is like more about how do we make this more normal so that players can deal with the ups and downs of their life as well as the ups and downs of the pitch, and not have to give up being on the pitch at all at any level because things become too overwhelming here because it doesn't get addressed at all. I think that's really the biggest question any of us can ask as part of this conversation. I know from my point of view that individually there were ups and downs all the time as I was trying to make my way in the professional game. There were some successes, more failures, but ultimately I chose to walk away from football completely, to go from step 3, 4 to just right down to step 7, and then stop playing between 26 and 34 completely, because I associated, there was too much going on in my life I wasn't speaking about at all, that it became so unenjoyable to be around football. So from a lived experience perspective, for me, that's really what drives my interest in supporting players in football, is to allow them to move through whatever struggles they have, but to continue playing. And if you can find ways to do that, that's brilliant. But there is no one way.
No rule that fits all.
I mean, that is bringing us really nicely to kind of why one of the reasons Dave put all of this together in the very first place, a non-league network, and then his vision via Jason to me, and I just brought straight into it, is because it's not just matching clubs and players and putting them together and just there you go, and eventually you'll find your level. Maybe, as you say, some of them maybe a little bit higher or lower than they probably should be, is because you're talking about people and a sport at different levels, but it's the same structure. You're still kicking a ball into a goal. The provision of care is different from the top level or down towards what we have at the non-league level. And in some ways, what Dave has been looking at doing is really having that provision that could be done for the professional side available to the non-league side. There is a weird bit in the professional side where when you are no longer an interesting asset to that club, very often you are gone bye-bye. So they will give you that care while you are useful to them, which is a big problem. But for the purpose of what we're looking at here, the non-league network, I think you've just brought in the conversation there really of there is a need to have something in place for the players. And it really does make sense. That's what we're looking at today, the player care element to it. But what would you see as being part of something helpful for players and clubs? I mean, obviously, Dave, what was your idea originally? Then we'll ask Ellie and Nick what they think. But what's your idea of what clubs need for players at the non-league level, mate?
So why I come up with this is my experience. I had joined an educational scholarship. It wasn't a pro one. It was doing a BTEC alongside playing football every day in a professional setting. So it was like being at an academy. We played against academies, scored a few goals against academies. But we had an S&C, ex-pros coaching us. We had all of it there. And then I went from that to a bit of reserves football and pub football, and then various different steps of non-league, all of which none had any S&C or physio or anything like that. That's what I want to sort of bring to non-league, is all these professional resources that we can bring to help players and clubs. And the reason why I actually come up with the idea is when I moved to Scunthorpe, I couldn't find a club because I didn't have any contacts in the area or anything like, or any highlight videos. My girlfriend from the area posted on her Facebook, and that's how I found a team, which was mad to me. So I wanted to be sort of the middleman between players and clubs, but then it's sort of evolved now into this ecosystem helping players and clubs, and I think we're really starting to get somewhere now.
Yeah, and I think that was the platform to have a look at people like Ellie and Nick to what you could probably, how can you help players and clubs really? Obviously, we know what you bring into it because I introduced the two into it. But what is it that you think actually non-league clubs more than others could do with at this stage?
Go on, Nick.
For me, I think I've touched on a couple of the themes already in some of what I've said. You know, from my lived experience, if I think I didn't play football at all between 26 and 34, that should have been when I was at my peak, really, whatever level that was at. When I'm at my fittest, when I'm strongest, I've got a good level of experience, and that didn't happen. And it didn't happen because, and we've all touched upon this as part of this conversation, there wasn't the right environment or the right person where I could just go and speak my truth. Because either within the club, I didn't want to not get picked, and all the things that we've already spoken about. So I think part of it is having somebody that it just has your welfare at heart and no one else. Now, if you're lucky, you have that support network around you, be it your family, your partner, friends, stuff like that. But because of that relationship, whenever you open up to them and be vulnerable, they have a vested interest because they have a relationship with you. If you decide to work with someone like me or someone like Ellie, who is detached, but is purely there for you, there are no barriers to be able to completely open up. We still have to build rapport. We still have to create the environment for you to really let us know what's going on. But that's the missing piece, especially at non-league level. And I think if you are a young player, especially, and you've come through the academy system, non-league's a shock.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. Whatever step you're at, like, you are cut adrift, quite literally, but you're also having to carry the weight of the rejection, and sometimes multiple rejections, and go into a completely different environment and be at your best. Now, I challenge anybody to be able to do that to the best of their ability on their own, especially as a young player. So I think for me, what we're trying to do is bridge a gap where it doesn't have to be that you're at crisis point, but it's just that something's getting in the way. Maybe it's I don't know how to fit into a new environment. I don't have those skills. Or it might be I'm noticing my confidence isn't where it was at. All of these things can be worked on, but it's very difficult to work on them within a club. So that's where I think providing the gap.
Yeah,
Have to be during crisis.
I think you mentioned the person to talk to who's outside of that initial remit. You mentioned the environment, and I wonder with Ellie, if you would think what that would look like, basically, if there's sort of an environment that could be. Do you have to physically be there with the club on site, or is there any way of doing this online, or one person, maybe a group? How do you manage that?
I think it can be online. I mean, I think you can, as a professional, you can pick up on the right signs that you need to pick up on from body language and tone and stuff like that through a video call. I guess what I really love what Nick's saying about bridging that gap, and I love that. And I think for me, there's a slightly different gap that I'm ambitious to bridge in a way, which is let's change the entire culture of a team. Let's get everybody talking. Let's get into big group meetings where we can actually normalize these words that are either ignored or avoided. Like, vulnerability is not a dirty word, but I bet you there'll be a lot of people listening today who will be feeling like it is. Yeah. And it's like, we need to get these words normalized so that people feel that they can put their hand up, or that if someone comes up to them and goes, "Are you all right, mate?" they don't have to go, "Yeah, I'm fine." They can say, "No, actually, I'm having a really rubbishy time, and let's maybe talk, maybe not talk." You don't have to talk, but people tend to want to have some sort of presence, and it's about normalizing that. So my gap is similar to Nick's, but it's a little bit different, because I'm kind of saying, let's get everyone talking. Let's get this comfortable for people so that actually everyone can help each other to some degree. And then that will help pinpoint the people who potentially need that little bit extra support. So we've almost got the sort of proactive stuff and then the reactive stuff, haven't we? But it's all perhaps it's bridging the same gap, but further, like bit further, like in a different position or something like that. But yeah, that's where I'm thinking.
I think it's really complementary.
Yeah.
It's looking at a situation that all players to greater or lesser degrees face, because we're all human beings.
Yeah.
And I think it's just approaching it from different angles, and that's why it works really well.
I love it. I think Dave, Jason, and myself have now got something to put together for our website for the Non-League Network, because we really want something for the player care element. I mean, it's not just about making more money or stop wasting money or infrastructure. There's actually people behind all of this, and it's making sure that we don't forget that, and it doesn't push people out the way, and like yourself, stop playing. I mean, both Dave and myself in our 20s stopped playing for a while, or weren't in that environment, and it's really hard when you're much later on looking back going, I wish I had been able to, or had things been in place. So I really appreciate your time in chatting to us. I knew the half an hour would fly by as well. We could talk about this. Well, I think you two could talk about this for hours and hours. Yeah, absolutely. I think Dave and I can definitely relate to a number of different people who would struggle to hear mental health, well-being, safeguard, lots of words that they just kind of almost go, feelings.
Yeah. I just wanted to add in actually something that just came into my mind. I think if the listeners today actually sat there and thought to themselves, if I was with my team and I said to them, I have serious anxiety right now, how many of them would feel that they might be laughed at or ignored or something like that? And that is the bit that has to change.
Anxiety in the locker room. Yeah. It's absolutely, that's a cultural change, I think. They might have more chance now than definitely 20 or 30 years ago. But there's still a long way to go, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's changed
Brilliant.
a lot.
Well, thank you very much. Nick, Ellie, Dave, it's been I was going to say it's been a lot of fun. It's been quite interesting, actually, to set it up and to see where this is going to go. And see, maybe we can have a catch up in a few months and see how we're moving things along. And maybe, you never know, the culture will change and all of a sudden everyone's able to do all of this and talk a lot more openly. One thing and one day at a time, I think. All right, be safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, guys. Thank you.